Welcome to your first lecture in anatomy and physiology. Today we are building the foundation that every other topic in this program will sit on, how the human body is organized. Before you can room a patient, document a chief complaint, or understand why a physician orders a particular test, you need a mental map of the body and the vocabulary to describe it precisely. This is what this lecture gives you. We're going to work through three big ideas. First, the structural levels of organization. The body is built on a predictable sequence, starting with atoms, which combine into molecules, which build cells, which group into tissues, which combine into organs, which work together as organ systems, which together form the living organism. Each level is more complex than the one below it, and each level depends on the one below it. Second, we will cover the basic anatomical and medical terminology that lets healthcare professionals describe body organization without ambiguity. That includes anatomical position, directional terms, and the planes of the body. Third, we will map the body cavities in the abdominopelvic quadrants and regions. This is the language you will hear in the exam room every single day when a provider says the patient has right lower quadrant tenderness or epigastric pain. Here's what you are accountable for by the end of this lecture. Outcome 1 asks you to describe the structural organization of the body. That means you should be able to put the levels in order from smallest to largest and say what each one does. Outcome 2 goes a step further. It is not enough to memorize a list. You need to be able to explain how each level builds on the one below it and give a concrete example at each level. Outcome 3 covers terminology. Medical language is precise for a reason. When two providers use the word distal, it has to mean exactly the same thing to both of them, no matter which way the patient is lying on the table. Anatomical position is the reference point that makes that possible. Outcome 4 is body cavities. You will need to know the dorsal and ventral cavities and everything inside each of them. Outcome 5 is the abdominopelvic quadrants and regions, and honestly, this is the outcome you will use most, often in a clinical setting, because it's how abdominal complaints get documented. Notice that outcomes 3, 4, and 5 are all heavily represented on certification exams, including the CCMA. As we move through the slides, if you can answer the outcome in your own words without looking at the slide, you are ready. If you cannot, flag it in your guided notes and bring it to me. This staircase is the single most important image in the lecture. At the bottom is the chemical level. Everything in your body is made of matter, and matter is made of atoms. Atoms bond together to form molecules, and in living things, those molecules include water, proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. Step 2 is the cellular level. Molecules assemble into cells, and the cell is the smallest unit that is considered alive because it can carry out all the processes of life on its own. Step 3 is the tissue level. When you group many similar cells together to perform a shared function, you have a tissue. Step 4 is the organ level. Put two or more different tissue types together into a structure with a specific job, and you have an organ. The stomach is a classic example because it contains epithelial, muscle, connective, and nervous tissue all in one structure. Step 5 is the organ system level. Organs that cooperate toward a common purpose form a system, like the digestive system. Step 6 is the organism, the complete living human being. Two things here to notice. First, complexity increases as you move up. Second, every level depends on the one below it. If something goes wrong at the chemical level, for example, an electrolyte imbalance, the effects show up all the way at the organism level. That is why this hierarchy matters clinically and not just academically. Let's start at the bottom of the staircase. The chemical level has two parts you need to distinguish: atoms and molecules. An atom is the smallest unit of an element that still has the properties of that element. Picture a dense center called the nucleus, which holds protons and neutrons surrounded by electrons. In the diagram, the gold dots represent electrons. Now, here's a fact worth memorizing because it shows up a lot on exams. Just 4 elements account for roughly 96% of your body mass: oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. A common mnemonic is the word CHON, C-H-O-N. The remaining few percent includes calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, and other trace elements, and even though they are small in quantity, they are enormous in importance. When 2 or more atoms bond chemically, you get a molecule. Water is the example on the right. 1 oxygen atom bonded to 2 hydrogen atoms, and water makes up somewhere between 50 and 60% of adult body weight. Larger molecules, called macromolecules, do the heavy lifting in the body. Carbohydrates supply quick energy. Lipids store energy and build cell membranes. Proteins form structures and act as enzymes and antibodies. Nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, carry genetic instructions. Think about why this matters to you as an MA. When you draw a basic metabolic panel in a blood sample, you are measuring the chemical level. A sodium or potassium value that is out of range can produce symptoms across the entire organism, including cardiac arrhythmias. Small levels, large consequences. Step 2 on the staircase is the cellular level. Molecules organize themselves into cells, and the cell is the smallest unit that can independently carry out the processes of life. That phrase matters. Protein cannot metabolize nutrients or reproduce itself, but a cell can. The adult human body contains trillions of cells and about 200 distinct cell types. Look at the diagram on the right and find 3 general parts. The plasma membrane, drawn here as the teal border, is the outer boundary that controls what enters and leaves the cell. The cytoplasm is the fluid interior, and suspended in it are organelles, the little working structures shown in gold. Organelles include mitochondria, which produce energy, ribosomes, which assemble proteins, and lysosomes, which digest waste. The nucleus in navy houses the DNA and directs cell activity. Now here's the important idea. Cells are specialized. A red blood cell is shaped like a flexible disc with no nucleus, so it can carry maximum oxygen and squeeze through the capillaries. A neuron has long extensions so it can transmit impulses over distance. A muscle cell contains contractile proteins so it can shorten. Structure follows function every time. And remember that every one of us started as a single fertilized cell that divided and then differentiated into all those specialized types. From a terminology standpoint, get comfortable with the roots cyte and cell, both meaning cell. You will see cytology, cytoplasm, and leukocyte. Each one becomes easier to decode once you know the root. Step 3 is the tissue level. Tissue is a group of many similar cells, along with the material between them, that work together on a shared function. There are exactly 4 basic tissue types in the human body, and you need to know all 4 well because they come up constantly. Number 1 is epithelial tissue. Epithelium covers body surfaces and lines cavities, ducts, and vessels, and it also forms glands. Think of the outer layer of your skin, the lining of your stomach, and the thyroid gland. The key feature is that epithelium is avascular, meaning it has no blood vessels of its own, so it receives nutrients from the tissue beneath it. Number 2 is connective tissue, which is the most abundant and most varied type. Its jobs are to support, bind, protect, and transport. Bone, cartilage, tendon, ligament, adipose or fat, and blood are all connective tissue. Students are frequently surprised that blood counts here, but it does, because it has cells suspended in a non-living matrix, which is the plasma. Number 3 is muscle tissue, which contracts to produce movement. There are 3 subtypes: skeletal muscle, which is voluntary and attaches to bone; smooth muscle, which is involuntary and is located in hollow organs like the intestines; and cardiac muscle, which is involuntary and found only in the heart. Number 4 is nervous tissue, which generates and transmits electrical impulses and coordinates body activities. It makes up the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. 4 types here: cover, support, move, and control. If you can remember those 4 verbs, you could rebuild this whole list. Step 4 is the organ level. The definition to write down is this: an organ is an anatomically distinct structure composed of 2 or more tissue types that work together to perform a specific function or set of functions. The key phrase is 2 or more tissue types. That is what separates an organ from a tissue. Look at the stomach on the right, because it is the cleanest example I can give you of this. Working from the inside out, the innermost layer is the mucosa, made up of epithelial tissue, and its job is to secrete acid and digestive enzymes and to absorb. Next is the submucosa, which is connective tissue carrying the blood vessels and nerves that supply the organ. Next is the muscularis, made of smooth muscle tissue, which churns the food and propels it toward the small intestine. The outermost layer is the serosa, another connective tissue layer that provides a smooth outer covering so the stomach can slide against the neighboring structures without friction. And nervous tissue runs throughout, coordinating secretion and motility. 4 tissue types, 1 organ, 1 coordinated job. Now think about what happens when one layer fails. A gastric ulcer is an erosion of that epithelial mucosa. The muscle layer may be perfectly healthy, but because the protective lining is compromised, acid reaches the tissues that were never meant to be reached, and the patient reports burning epigastric pain. When you take that history and document it, you are describing an organ level problem in a specific abdominal region, which is where we're headed later in this lecture. Steps 5 and 6 finish the staircase. An organ system is a group of organs that work together to perform major functions or meet a physiological need of the body. Most textbooks used in medical assisting programs, including OpenStax, describe 11 organ systems, and they are all on this slide. The integumentary system is skin, hair, and nails, and it is your first line of defense. Skeletal supports and protects and produces blood cells. Muscular produces movement and heat. Nervous provides rapid control through electrical signaling. Endocrine provides slower, longer-lasting control through hormones. Cardiovascular transports blood, oxygen, nutrients, and waste. Lymphatic returns fluid and provides immune defense. Respiratory exchanges oxygen and carbon dioxide. Digestive breaks down food and absorbs nutrients. Urinary filters blood and eliminates liquid waste. Reproductive produces offspring. Now notice at the note at the bottom, because this is the part students get tripped up on. Systems overlap, and assigning an organ to exactly one system is sometimes imprecise. The pancreas is a digestive organ because it secretes digestive enzymes. And it's also an endocrine organ because it secretes insulin and glucagon hormones. The pharynx is shared by the respiratory and digestive systems. Don't let this bother you. It reflects how the body actually works. Finally, level 6 is the organism, the complete living human being, which is all 11 systems functioning together to maintain homeostasis, which means a stable internal environment. When one system fails, others compensate, which is why a patient with kidney disease often develops cardiovascular symptoms as well. We now shift from structure to language. Anatomical position is the universal reference stance, and every directional term you will ever use assumes the patient is in it. The body is standing erect, facing forward, feet flat on the floor and slightly apart, arms hanging at the sides, and this is a detail people usually forget. The palms are facing forward. We use a fixed reference because patients are rarely standing when you examine them. A patient can be seated, supine, or lying on one side, and the directional terms do not change meaning. Now work through the pairs on the right. Superior means above or toward the head. Inferior means below or toward the feet. The nose is superior to the mouth. Anterior, also called ventral, means toward the front. Posterior, also called dorsal, means toward the back. The sternum is anterior to the heart. Medial means toward the midline. Lateral means away from the midline. The great toe is medial, the little toe is lateral. Proximal means nearer to the point of attachment or the trunk. Distal means farther from it. The elbow is proximal to the wrist. These two are used constantly when documenting extremity injuries. Superficial means toward the surface, deep means away from it. And two positioning terms you will use daily. Prone is lying face down, supine is lying face up. One rule I want burned into your memory, at the bottom of the slide there. Right and left always refer to the patient's right and left, never yours as you face them. Charting a wound on the wrong side is a real and preventative error. Planes are imaginary flat surfaces that pass through the body, and we use them to describe how a structure is divided or how an image was taken. There are three you should know. The sagittal plane runs vertically and divides the body into right and left portions. If it passes exactly through the midline so the two halves are equal, we call it a mid-sagittal or median plane. If it's off-center, producing unequal right and left portions, it's called a parasagittal plane. The frontal plane, also called the coronal plane, also runs vertically, but it divides the body into anterior and posterior portions, or front and back. A helpful memory trick is that a crown, or corona, sits across the top of the head from ear to ear, which is the direction that the frontal plane runs. The transverse plane, also called the horizontal plane, runs horizontally and divides the body into superior and inferior portions, or up and down. Where you will actually encounter these is imaging. A CT scan produces a series of transverse sections, essentially slices of the body from top to bottom. An MRI can be acquired in any of the three planes, and a radiologist will specify which one. When a provider dictates that a lesion is seen on axial imaging, axial is another word for transverse. Get these three straight now, because the moment we discuss abdominal quadrants and regions, you will see the planes reappear as the lines that create those divisions. Body cavities are closed spaces that house and protect the internal organs, which we collectively call viscera. There are two main cavities, and the easiest way to keep them straight is to remember that dorsal means back and ventral means front. The dorsal cavity, shown on the left of the figure, is located on the posterior side of the body and contains the organs of the central nervous system. It has two subdivisions. The cranial cavity is formed by the skull and houses the brain. The spinal cavity, also called the vertebral or spinal canal, runs through the vertebral column and houses the spinal cord. These two are continuous with each other, which makes sense because the brain and spinal cord are continuous. The ventral cavity is on the anterior side and is much larger. It also has two main subdivisions, and the structure that separates them is the diaphragm. Above the diaphragm is the thoracic cavity, which contains two pleural cavities, one around each lung, and a central region called the mediastinum. Within the mediastinum sits the pericardial cavity, which surrounds the heart. Below the diaphragm is the abdominopelvic cavity, which we subdivide into the abdominal cavity, containing the stomach, intestines, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, and kidneys, and the pelvic cavity, containing a urinary bladder, part of the large intestine, and the internal reproductive organs. Notice there is no physical wall between the abdominal and pelvic cavities. The division is by location, not by an actual membrane. This is why we describe it as one continuous abdominopelvic cavity. The abdominopelvic cavity is large and holds many organs, so we need a way to pinpoint location. There are two accepted systems, and you will use both. The four-quadrant system is created by drawing one mid-sagittal plane vertically through the umbilicus and one transverse plane horizontally through the umbilicus. That gives you the right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, and left lower quadrant, abbreviated RUQ, LUQ, RLQ, and LLQ. This is the system you will see most often in charting and in emergency settings because it's fast and unambiguous. Learn a few anchor organs for each. The right upper quadrant holds the liver and gallbladder. The left upper quadrant holds the stomach and spleen. The right lower quadrant holds the appendix. The left lower quadrant holds the sigmoid colon. The nine-region system is more precise and is used more in anatomy and in some physician documentation. It is created by two vertical midclavicular planes and two horizontal planes, the subcostal plane just below the ribs and the intertubercular plane near the hip bones. Picture a tic-tac-toe grid on the abdomen. Across the top are the right hypochondriac, epigastric, and left hypochondriac regions. Across the middle are the right lumbar, umbilical, and left lumbar. Across the bottom are the right iliac or inguinal, hypogastric or pubic, and the left iliac or inguinal. Break the words apart and they teach themselves. Hypochondriac means below the cartilage of the ribs. Epigastric means upon or above the stomach. Hypogastric means below the stomach. And once more, right and left are always the patient's, not yours. Now let's close this topic out by pulling the whole lecture into 5 statements. 1. The body is organized into 6 levels of increasing complexity: chemical, cellular, tissue, organ, organ system, and organism. Every level is built from the one beneath it, so a disruption at a low level can produce symptoms at the highest level. 2. There are exactly 4 basic tissue types. Epithelial tissue covers and lines and forms glands. Connective tissue supports, binds, protects, and transports, and it is the most abundant type. Muscle tissue contracts to produce movement in three forms: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Nervous tissue generates and transmits impulses. 3. 11 organ systems maintain the organism and they overlap. The pancreas serves both the digestive and endocrine systems, which is a reminder that these categories are tools for learning more than rigid walls. 4. All anatomical terminology is anchored to anatomical position, standing erect, facing forward, palms forward. Learn the directional pairs and never forget that right and left belong to the patient. 5. Cavities, quadrants, and regions are how we localize what we find. Dorsal versus ventral, the 4 quadrants, and the 9 regions. When a provider tells you a patient has right lower quadrant rebound tenderness, you should immediately picture the appendix. Your next step is to finish the guided notes and complete the self-check activity. As always, check out these references for more information on this topic.